Now, earlier this week, Kelly Rogers, who is a Maryland-based GOP consultant, pleaded guilty to wire fraud. So now you might not have heard about this, but it's I think it's important news because it shows, of course, that there's a lot of groups, a ton of groups on the right wing who take advantage of donors. And I'm not talking about the big corporate donors that the right wing tends to roll in, but there is a big cottage industry of grift on the right wing towards people who aren't necessarily of means, right? So now Rogers is a staunch right winger, right? So very, very conservative person, and he ran multiple political action committees. Now, these committees included the Conservative Majority Fund and the Tea Party Majority. You guys remember the Tea Party? Kind of like a yesterday thing or whatever. Because back in 2012, you guys remember it's a huge deal. Oh my God, the Tea Party! Look at all these Tea Party people sweeping into Congress. Biggest movement ever. They got the most, positive news coverage, and so there were basically giant stars in the right wing, but it was like an astroturf kind of thing. Now compare that to news coverage of people on the left. We did not get that kind of positive news coverage, even AOC, right? So the Tea Party, right? Now, apparently, Tea Party still has these PACs going, right? But not this one. See, according to prosecutors, Mr. Kelly, or I should say Mr. Rogers, took in about $10 million from mostly small donors over the span of a few years, about 7 years, right? So he took $10 million in order to give to conservative causes and politicians, right? Turns out, according to filings, he only dispersed about $48,400 to politicians. That's a very minuscule amount of that 10 million, not thousand, $1 million. $48,400 out of 10 million. So the question naturally is, well, where did the rest of it go? Well, it turns out, kind of went into their pockets. According to prosecutors, the rest of the money was used to pay himself and his friends, as well as settle legal fees from a state lawsuit that was investigating his political activity, all while sending emails to donors talking about how much he was doing to fight, at the time, President Barack Obama and illegal immigration. Interesting. So now, Washington Field Office Assistant Director Timothy Slater said this about Rogers, quote, "He swindled millions of dollars from individuals attempting to participate in our democratic process by giving these groups money. These, by the way, shady right-wing groups money." Now, he continued by saying, instead of using donations to provide assistance to support military veterans, as he advertised, Rogers used the money to benefit himself and his associates. So that's a common thing on the right wing, unfortunately, right? So, oh no, we support the troops, we support the veterans, we're going to raise money. Oops, looks like that money didn't go to veterans. It went into my pocket. Sad day for you. Sad day for the veterans. Now, again, this is what Rogers did. It's kind of reminiscent of what Trump had done through his charity, the Trump Foundation. They promised to get a bunch of money for veterans and send them that money. But what happened? He never sent the money. So this is a pattern of right-wing grift of their own members, by the way. It's not like they're taking money from liberals or progressives or anything like that. No, they're taking money from their own base, and they're just putting it right in their pocket. Now, are we at all shocked by this? I would say no, right? Maybe you are, okay. And I can understand why if you don't pay attention to this stuff, right? But no, I'm not shocked. The fool and his money is, easily parted, as the old adage goes, right? And look, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of conservative donors out there that tend to be the biggest fools. And by that, I mean they're easily defrauded. And that's the problem here. Okay? So now, that's not me saying it. That's looking at the patterns here, right? And I don't know if it's because most conservatives are a little bit older and therefore a little less internet savvy. I'm not saying that all old people are not internet savvy. There's some wonderful people who are incredibly knowledgeable about the internet and about scams and avoid them, who happen to be older, very much older, right? But I'm saying generally, older people tend to be defrauded a little bit easier, and a lot of older people tend to skew more conservative as well. They tend to fall for more scams. Okay, so I don't know what it is though. That's just me throwing out some ideas, but more details. Now, the original investigation of Rogers by Politico, teaming up with ProPublica, which first led the FBI to raid his Maryland offices and arrest him in 2017, showed that Conservative Majority Fund relied on donor information it collected for the American Conservative Union. And this kind of shows how there's this just giant web of conservative groups all backing each other, and all getting and you can see this is sort of the reason why the right seems to be so incredibly organized, because all these shady donor groups are in a way connected. They're connected to different think tanks. They're connected to different groups. They're connected by different people. They're promoted by right-wing websites. So this is a giant web, right? And so the ACU was part of this web. And so now the Conservative Majority Fund got a lot of their donor lists, their donor information from ACU. Now, ACU just happens to be the organizer of CPAC. That's interesting. So now they used the organizer to target people, specific people, to defraud out of money. Now, the ACU says, we had no idea that they were defrauding our people. We had no idea what Rogers was doing or his PACs. We didn't know. And so don't blame us. Not our fault. We just gave them the list because no, we on the right. We kind of share everything with each other and maintain sort of a more unified front that way. Look, okay, that's probably true, right? But at the same time, as I mentioned before, grifting is really rampant on the right wing. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these, or most of these, PACs and groups on the right wing are actively involved in scamming people. Let me give you an example of this, right? So now earlier this year, David Bossie's presidential coalition took in millions of dollars from donors giving less than $200 each in a single year. So now they took in all this money, millions of dollars, and they spent it on Bossie's salary, consultants, and efforts to raise more money. Now, according to IRS filings reviewed by Axios and the Campaign Legal Center, Bossie's 527 political organization raised a staggering $18.5 million between 2007 and 2018. Now, they promised the donors that the group was, quote, dedicated to identifying and supporting conservative candidates running for office at the state and local levels of government. Now, that's what they say their mission is. But their real mission was to put money in their own pockets. Of the $15.4 million that the President Coalition spent during that period, only $425,442, or about 3%, were actually spent on candidates, political committees, or state and local ads supporting said candidates. 3% of the money was spent on what they said they were going to do. Where'd the rest of the money go? Well, the 97% of that money was traced going basically directly into the pockets of the political consultants, people like David Bossie. Yeah. According to IRS documents, the presidential coalition spent millions of dollars on contracts with 14 direct marketing firms to fuel their fundraising efforts. Several million dollars more on postage to send mailers and books, and at least $1.1 million to telemarketing firms associated with InfoCision. Now, InfoCision is really interesting. They were previously accused by former employers of preying on elderly donors. And $1.2 million on donor cultivation lists. So there's another scam. Okay, then. Now, the Campaign Legal Center notes that these two firms were not alone in this scam. In fact, they say that there is a cottage industry of groups that target vulnerable communities with self-serving borderline scams. And the reason that they proliferate, by the way, is because they're super easy to set up. Now, ironically, they're very easy to set up because of Citizens United. Yeah, so Citizens United made PACs incredibly easy, dark money PACs, independent expenditures, and a whole host of corruption, as well as being able to scam people without a lot of, I guess, oversight and accountability. So that's what's going on here. Now, the reason that there's another reason too why these proliferate, and it's because you have almost no enforcement at the FEC. In fact, Republicans have essentially had the FEC on gridlock. So it doesn't function the way that it should. So it's essentially been shut down. Now, these shady groups can't wait to separate conservative donors from their money and essentially put it into their own pockets. And that's what's going on here. Now, as much schadenfreude as I get from seeing conservatives waste their money in these ridiculous PACs, right? I don't think that it's the right thing to do. And I actually believe that this situation would be solved if we were to get all the money out of politics, period. Now, Andrew Yang, I'm no member of the Yang gang. Let's be honest, I'm for Bernie Sanders. But I think Yang had an excellent idea. It's called democracy dollars, right? And so you get so much money in democracy dollars to give to whatever candidate you choose. And that's all you get. No public financing, or I'm sorry, no private financing of election, all public financing. Wonderful. I love those ideas, right? That's one good idea to get money out of politics. And there are several others. Another one is a constitutional amendment to end Citizens United and the idea of money being speech and corporations having unlimited speech rights. That would have, and not only corporations, but unions as well, get all the private financing out of elections and go to a completely, to a 100% public financing model for these elections. That's the best way to end this corruption. Okay. So now, at the end of the day, and the reason that I want to get all this money out of politics is because as long as you have private financing of elections, you will have these elections decided by private interests, not the people. You will have bribes. And in this case, people who use the mechanism and use this system to scam people who are vulnerable. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.